2019 was also the year that I met David Meltzer. So that was another very pivotal moment for me. Trying to explain to people through text what I'm talking about. Like, look, everybody, I'm going to be on TV. The person who won their face, I forget how he phrased, but basically only one person's face is going to show up on the screen. It's going to be the winner. Everybody else hang tight. It's on YouTube. They posted it on YouTube after it was, everything had aired, and it was titled The Pitch That Made Us Cry. If anybody's interested in watching, it is still on Amazon Prime. Season 1, episode 3. And in 2011, I contracted a rare illness called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which initially left me paralyzed. The more of us that lean into positivity and gratitude and miracles, the better off the world's going to be.
Inspiration Nation, hello. Welcome to another week on the podcast. As you can see, I'm here with an amazing guest on the podcast. I'm here alone, so Lee and Ryan aren't here, so we know we've got another interview. I'm introducing to you Bonnie, aka Posh Notions. And if you remember, everybody, from the previous podcast we did a Instagram live when we did Ways That We Grow on episode 109. So we are going to continue that, and as you can hear, there's little ones in the background. I think this is the best, and we're going to continue with that, all right? So you can find us at Listen to IN. You can find us on Twitter, all those spaces. You can find us at inspirationnation.org.uk. Go over there, check out all the episodes, and check out everything, all the back catalogue, etc., especially the one we're going to be talking about and referencing in this episode 109. So welcome, Bonnie, aka Posh Notions. So how are you today?
I am great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Hey, turn it back on.
I'm great. You're here. You've got your little ones in the background. This is real life. I absolutely love it. And I just wanted to continue really our conversation that we had in episode 109, because you've got an absolutely amazing, inspiring story. You talked about your fibromyalgia, you talked about your paralysis, you talked about all those types of things. And I just wanted to sort of, if you could just give us a brief overview and just continue that, just recount, because I think some of the audio was a little bit lost because it was like a little bit sketchy. So, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Bonnie, and your story, because I think it's so inspiring.
Sure. So I'll just give a brief overview. Had a somewhat tumultuous, upbringing, childhood. I ended up having my first child pretty young, had kids pretty young, at 21. He's 21 now. I had my daughter when I was 23, turning 24. Shortly after having my daughter, I think she was about a year old, I decided to go back to school for accounting because it was something I knew that I would be good at, and it was a fairly easy degree for me. It was only 2 years long, and it was better than making minimum wage. So I did that for maybe 5-6 years. And in 2011, I contracted a rare illness called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which initially left me paralyzed for a few days and was very similar to having a stroke. So I lost all my reflexes, I lost my motor skills. I had to learn to eat and walk and talk and basically use my body all over again. Spent a few weeks in the hospital, first trying to get diagnosed and then in rehab. And I half joke that it should have been a wake-up call, and it really wasn't. I came home and tried to jump right back into my life, and quickly found out that wasn't going to be possible in the way that I want it to be. I had a lot of physical healing to do, and ended up having to leave my job a couple of months later because my cognitive function was so impaired that I just couldn't perform my job duties anymore. I might have mentioned this before, but I really believe that kind of what set that off was the amount of stress that I was under and the way I was living my life at that point in time. I was a single mom. My husband and I had separated. My oldest is on the autism spectrum. I was working with multiple services with him. They were coming in our home 5 to 6 days a week. therapy for myself. I have mental health history that way preceded my physical health history way back in, it started in childhood. I was taking multiple medications for that. I was taking care of the kids. I was working from home. It was summertime. I wasn't eating properly. I was pumping a ton of caffeine. I'd lost a ton. I love you too. I lost a ton of weight. I was down to like 113 pounds or something, and just I'm a 5'9", so that's pretty thin for my size and for me in general. And I really just, like I said, I wasn't taking care of myself. I was trying to take care of everything and everybody else on my own. I'd help with my son with people coming in, but the rest of the time it was just me and the kids. And just really spent a lot of, probably most of my time in under like high stress, fight or flight mode. Everything felt like an emergency. And the way I kind of explain it to people is that my body basically just shut me off like a surge protector, because had I continued to go the way I was going, I probably wouldn't have made it much longer. And so it was really a protection mechanism. Now, I did not see that right away. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I had this epiphany. Like I said, I went home and tried to go right back to work the next day, and didn't change too much about what I was doing, like except for physically what I had to. So like I was crawling up my stairs to get to the bathroom because I had no physical strength. I wasn't able to lift a pot of water to, like boil noodles or whatever. So my kids were eating a lot of like Chef Boyardee and, microwave meals, whatever they could prepare at 9 and 11 on their own. You know, so, but in my mind, all I wanted to do was go back to my old life. Like that, I had lost in a matter of seconds my whole entire identity that I thought. And rather than looking at that as a chance at that point to be new and rebuild, it was devastating. He's so funny.
I love it.
He's just standing there blowing me kisses.
I
love you too. So yeah, if anybody's wondering, my husband's not here, so I'm doing this alone today, which is why he keeps coming in and out.
Great.
But yeah, so that's where what I call the first part of my healing journey. That's really where the physical healing started, and the mental healing, had I allowed it, probably would have started at the same time. But I wasn't looking at it that way from the get-go. So it was several more months of diagnoses, and I had one doctor say there was no way I had Guillain-Barré syndrome because I had healed physically more than they expect a person to in a couple of months. So I wasn't showing the physical signs according to them anymore. So then they said I had fibromyalgia, and it was like, you have 6 months, you're going to get better. And then it was like, you're not going to get better. And as time progressed, I had my now 8-year-old in 2013. My husband and I reconciled right around the time that I got sick. And we had agreed to right before I got sick. And then he ended up leaving and going to Texas. So I was still home alone with the kids. He was pursuing a job down there. Ended up, like I said, I was kind of going around in a circle, but ended up having our son in 2013. And shortly after that, it was a couple months after having him, the pain that started to kind of creep in when I first came home from the hospital came back with a vengeance, and worse, and in more places. And ultimately, they diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis. I was super swelled up all the time, retaining a ton of fluid. My joints and everything were hurting. And it was then that I guess I probably realized that things weren't going to get better, or at least that's what I was being told. The doctors were, this is a degenerative disease. It progresses and gets worse. People don't get better from this. And I was still fairly determined to, like, I I didn't want that. I was in denial. Like I was like, that's not happening to me, you know?
Mm.
Um, and so let's see. And I ended up kind of going back and forth with the doctors for a while. I not neglected. What do you call it? I didn't take any meds for the first 2 years because I was nursing my son, and most of the meds aren't approved for in nursing. But when I finally did agree to take the meds, I had a hell of a time finding something that would work because I was having allergic reactions to things. I was having the one actually sent me into like clinical psychosis, like I had a psychotic breakdown. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't, the side effects for me were way worse than dealing with the pain. And as frustrating as it was, it just wasn't worth the even more mental health problems that this stuff was giving me. So 2016, I had the little one that just keeps coming in and out,
A lovely one.
Sebastian, and
Lovely.
complete miracle baby. Both my husband and I at that point had surgery to not have any more children. And yeah, so he was a complete surprise and miraculous. Like I can't even, without getting into all the details, like can't even explain how much of a miracle this child is. And when I was pregnant with him, so I got pregnant in January, and then over the summer, I realized that, well, maybe not realized, but I finally came to terms with the fact that like we just didn't have enough money. We're really struggling to even make ends meet. I wasn't working. My husband was working. But with a fourth child on the way, I realized we needed to try to do something more. And that's when I started getting into what then later became Posh Notions. So I started working with a cutting machine, very scrappy. I started with a gift and like $50 worth of vinyl. Learned all the ins and outs of how to operate the machine and the software and whatnot, and started off by making just simple decals. My husband was doing audio competitions back then, and so I was making basically decals for the team. Is how I got started. So yeah, that was leading all up into Posh Notions. I honestly don't remember all what we covered in the last interview because it was so impromptu.
Yeah, it was lovely. And there was a thing in there because you talked about the psychosis episodes, and you mentioned in the last episode that you were like having suicidal thoughts. Was that to do with that? Or tell me a bit more about that, because you've gone from this whole journey of, suffering with all this paralysis. And I think you talked about Crohn's disease as well. We were talking about fibromyalgia, you talked about arthritis. And then you're talking about the psychosis and the suicidal thoughts. And, before you get into, I imagine this is before you got to like doing your business and going to that side. So talk me a little bit through how did you actually get through how did you get through that?
So I don't have Crohn's, but I do have another stomach autoimmune condition called gastroparesis, which is basically my stomach is partially paralyzed. So it doesn't break foods down properly, limits what I can eat, flares up just like any other autoimmune condition. And I have multiple others that at this point, they have all just become labels or titles because it really doesn't change what I'm doing. I monitor my diet. I exercise. I do yoga. I try to meditate. I do all of these other mindset things now. But yes, I did. I struggled with suicidal, ideation all the way back in probably early teenage years, maybe before that I just don't remember. And a lot of it was just, it was depression. It was it was anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder. I've been diagnosed with so many different things that it's really kind of hard to keep track of all of them. And I'm at the point where I honestly don't even believe that most of those titles even were, or labels or whatever you want to call them. Like, I know I had anxiety. I know I had depression. I know I've struggled with these things. But I think a lot of the other stuff that came up had more to do with the medication than it did with what I was actually struggling with. Because once you get on a medication like that, and this isn't for everyone, but once you get on something and you're still having problems, they start adding more medication. And at least here in the States, and in my experience, they sent me to therapy, but therapy was literally rehashing the past over and over and over and over and over again for 15 years. I didn't make any progress because I wasn't learning that I had control over how this stuff affected me. I never once heard that in therapy, that I was in control. And even if I did, I wasn't in the right frame of mind to accept that that was the case. And you're really kind of led to believe that these are conditions that are lifelong. It's something you're going to have to deal with. You have to figure out how to manage and cope with them. And nobody ever tells you that this is something you can overcome.
Yeah.
Like ever. I never once heard of someone being cured of depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder. It was a label, and it's like, this is what you have, this is who you are, and you've got to learn to deal with it for the rest of your life, kind of thing. And it really wasn't. So I struggled with those ideations. A lot of it also came up during like hormonal changes. And it just, to me, got to the point where it was like, I knew it was coming, and I just had to do the best that I could to try to override it or ignore it the best that I could. Like, I knew it was going to pass. It wasn't with me every single day. It would, occur and last for a few days. But it was really intense because the littlest thing would set off these thoughts of, I don't deserve to be here. Like, and it's hard for a lot of people who haven't been through to imagine, when you've given your power away to an illness or to other people or to opinions or judgments of other people, and this is how you've grown up and you don't know any better, when you believe that, someone else's opinion of you is way more important than your opinion of yourself. And that person's opinion of you at one point is, I can't stand you. I can't, I don't want to be around you. Or at least that's kind of what you're thinking it is. You don't see any reason that you need to stick around. And really at that point, my only, my saving grace was probably my children. But there were a lot of times I also believed that I didn't deserve to be their mother because I didn't feel like I was a good person because I was having these thoughts. So it was really a self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately. And a lot of that, it's interesting because also once you're labeled with those things, you're treated as those labels by every single medical professional that you encounter. I'm still having some stigma, I guess, attached to me that I'm trying to break free of now, because for a long time I used that as like my crutch, my reason for not being okay, my, not excuse for doing things certain way, not like I can't help it, but at the same time, like it made me feel like I didn't have any control over it. That's what I had been taught. And it wasn't until 2017 when I told my doctor basically to kick rocks.
What does kick rocks mean? Does that mean get out of here?
It's a nice way to
I'm
say,
going up.
yeah.
Is that what it means?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm to go my own way. You can just keep your opinion. I'm doing this. Is that what you mean?
That's basically, so I went in to see my psychiatrist for the millionth time, complaining of like, I was having more rage and more frustration. And a lot of it was anger with my body, like not functioning the way I wanted it to function, not being able to do things, and then getting upset with other people for not wanting to help me, which I can now see why I was an angry mess. Like nobody's going to want to help me kind of thing. But it was, like I said, the umpteenth time I'd been in there, I was on like a dozen different psych meds. I told them, I don't know how many times I was struggling. And like I said, though, when you've been struggling with anxiety and depression, they just put you on another med or take a med away or up this one or decrease that one or do whatever. There's never this real conversation of maybe you don't need this medication. The answer is always just more medication. And I had gotten so severe at that point that I didn't even believe that I could live without the medication. Like there was never a point in time where I thought to myself, maybe I should try getting off this stuff. until this day. And I was talking to him and again saying, like I said, the same things. And he said, well, it could potentially be this one medication you've been taking for 15 years. And I'm not mentioning it because I know it helps a lot of people. And I was like, I'm done. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, I have gone through hell and high water. I have tried all of these different things, weight going up, weight going down, and what something clicked that day that was like, I'm done. I was like, this is not working for me. I had all of the experience with the rheumatology meds that hadn't worked for me. I was like, I'm not taking any of this stuff anymore. And I don't recommend anybody doing this. I had been on and off and titrated on and off so many different medications. I knew at that point how to safely get off of them and what to do if I felt like there was something dangerous happening. And I spent the next month or two getting off of all of the psych meds. So like I said, there was like a dozen of them. Give me 1 second.
You're all right.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
He got stuck under the bed, or thought he was stuck under the bed. Anyways, so yeah, again, so like I said, I ended up quitting all these meds. It wasn't until recently that I realized what was so great about that, and this is why I call that kind of like the second part of my healing journey, was because I took my power back that day. I decided to listen to my body versus, the experts, and at least give myself an opportunity to detox and get off of all the meds and figure out what my actual baseline was. And once I did that, and I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't a struggle, but the suicidal ideations pretty much completely went away. I wasn't struggling with the depression as much. I was still struggling with anxiety because I didn't have the help of those meds. And I had not been in what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. I had been in talk therapy for 15 years. So I now was left with trying to figure out and learn how to deal with all of the stuff that I had been basically numbing for a decade and a half or longer with the medication, and find ways to cope and to manage and ultimately, thrive instead of just surviving, which is basically what I had been doing for so long. So yeah, that was a pivotal moment for me, was realizing that I was going to be okay without the meds. And it's not like I knew that when I said that to the doctor. It was I was taking a gamble on myself and taking a gamble on, not going to say life, but I was just taking it. I was betting on myself that things were going to work out one way or another. But I knew at least that that's not the way I wanted things to continue going, because it really wasn't working for me. So looking back on it now, I see it as really brave. Looking at it then, it was more of like an F you to my doctor. Like, you've completely lost my trust. I respect the man for what he tried to do for me. But it was just a huge turning point for me. I don't even think I realized at the time what a big deal it really was. It wasn't until later, looking back, hindsight is 2020, that I realized all of the things that opened up once I took back. Excuse me.
All right.
Sorry.
It's okay.
You're gonna get put in timeout. Your patience.
You're more than welcome. Okay. This is life.
Did you hear what he said?
No, I didn't.
He said FBI and open up.
Oh, really? Love the creativity. I love the creativity.
Oh my goodness. Anyways, like I was saying, I don't think I realized, like I said, what I was doing that day. It was just, I couldn't do what I had been doing. It wasn't working for me. And I was willing to give myself a chance to kind of try to figure these things out. And I never did go back to see him. But what happened after that, like I said, I don't think I realized how amazing and what I was opening myself up to. It was really finding myself again. Like, once I got off of all this stuff, I really didn't know who I was. What did I like doing? What did I not like doing? I had just been kind of going through life, especially as a people pleaser,
Yeah.
doing things to keep the peace, because if it wasn't peaceful, I was an anxious, nervous wreck, or I was having episodes of depression, or, just struggling in general. And it kind of gave me the courage to start very small baby steps, kind of exploring what it was that I actually wanted to do. I had no idea. Like people would ask me, well, what do you do for fun? And it's like, I play with my kids. I do this, but everything was something with or for somebody else basically at that point, which is, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, I wasn't taking care of, I might've been taking care of my body better, but I wasn't taking care of like my soul. I had lost all sense of my intuition. I had lost all sense of actually listening to my body. I had completely disconnected from anything other than what I needed to do to get through every day successfully, as stress-free as possible, or, you know, you know, not flipping out on somebody or getting angry about something that wasn't really worth getting angry about. And like I said, once I was kind of got rid of all of that and got it all out of my system, um, things just started happening. I met my now best friend, who's a very spiritual person. I started remembering these things that I like to do, 2 decades prior, because I had basically been on medication my entire adult life. I started getting interested in those things again. Some of it, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I know the one thing, and I still like it, but it's not like a must do for me anymore. Like, I planted a garden every year. It's very soothing for me. But it was also something I kind of felt like I should be doing. And I remember for the first time, the following spring, I was like, I had no interest in planting a garden. It was so weird for me, because we had just built this massive, well, not massive, massive for here in the suburbs, raised garden bed while I was pregnant with my youngest the year prior, 2 years prior to that. And I was like, I wasn't rushing out in March to plant stuff for the first time. And I thought actually that I was going back into depression, because that's one of the key things they tell you is, key signs of depression is when you're no longer interested in things that you used to be interested in. And I was second guessing myself and like, am I depressed? Am I not depressed? Maybe I don't like doing this anymore. Maybe I do like maybe it's just not, I don't like, there's all these different thoughts, a lot of second guessing going on. But 2018 was definitely was pivotal. So end of 2017, I stumbled upon it was like Gary Vee and Tony Robbins, and I started being introduced to his whole entrepreneurial and motivational, inspirational stuff. And I'm like, I had no idea people talked like this, let alone like publicly and in groups. And like, I had never experienced that before. And maybe part of it was I wasn't open to it, or maybe I wasn't ready for it. It's probably a combination of things. But I don't even remember how it happened, but it did. And I was just so taken aback by the fact that like, because people in my general realm, they didn't talk like this. I'm not gonna say I lost, but a lot of friends fell by the wayside kind of around the same period of time. Well, I lost a lot of friends when I first got sick, because I wasn't able to drive and go out and do things the way that I had been. And then I had more kids. So but at that time, I noticed the more I kind of dove into these different people and practices and beliefs and whatnot, more and more people were falling away. The people I used to skip on the phone with and gripe and, bitch about stuff with.
Yeah.
I was kind of changing the way that I talked, and it didn't make any sense to them how I could be so optimistic about the same stuff that I used to be pessimistic about. And I wasn't really relating to them anymore, because I was like, can't you see like that this is actually like a blessing, or that we're really lucky, or, this worked out and it could have been way worse kind of thing. And it was actually in 2018 when I drove to meet Gary Vee, which is something that I would have never thought to do, making this trip with my two teenagers, literally with less than 24 hours. Like I was like, I'm going to go. And then we left the next day and next morning. And that was just this amazing experience. And it was also for me, it I had to overcome so many fears that I had to make this trip alone with two teenagers. And, you know, so I let go a lot of those things, but at the same time, I realized how much more I was capable of than I previously realized. Like all of these things I had believed about myself, like I can't, get over my anxiety. If something makes me anxious, I'm going to avoid it. If something makes me scared, I'm going to avoid it. I started kind of jumping into those things, and also making more split second, less agonizingly, painful decisions, and just going with it. And that was really, again, looking back, I realized within the last 6 months or so that was intuition, and that was me listening to my intuition. Finally, it was finally starting to speak up again, and I was listening, because it wasn't being hushed anymore. So yeah, that was the beginning of that for me, of the introduction. Like I said, like I knew people built businesses and did these different things, but I didn't realize it was like this whole culture, and I've met some really amazing people because of that, because of opening myself up to things that I wouldn't have previously. But 2018 was also almost a devastating year for me as well, as towards the end of the year. Well, I had been having spine pain, really bad pain in my spine for months. I usually let something go for a while because the nature of the arthritis is, my wrist will flare up and my fingers something will hurt for 3 to 4 weeks. And then eventually it calms down and things go back to my normal. But this was kind of relenting. And I think it was in August, I went to my doctor and I was like, well, I've got to do something about this. They discovered the arthritis had moved to my spine. And I was honestly terrified that my spine was just going to completely fall apart, because I am really lucky and I'm really grateful, because with this being a degenerative disease, lots of people I'm like a decade into it almost now, and are immobilized in one way, shape, or form. And, but I believe that if I didn't do something to step in and stop that's exactly what was going to happen to me at that point. So I agreed to take a biologic medication, which basically shuts your immune system off, to try to slow the progression of this, because my youngest two kids were only 5 and 2 at the time. And I was determined that I wasn't going to let the disease get the best of me, and that I was going to be able to do stuff with them, and honestly, I'm not going to say it was the worst decision I've ever made, but it's definitely was one of the worst medications I've ever taken. The thing that I thought was my saving grace. Like I was really hoping that it was going to do what I needed it to do. And lots of people live very successfully on these medications, with very little side effects. And that was just, like, once again, not the case for me. And it wrecked my life. It went the complete opposite direction. I was so sick for 6 or 7 months. Because it shuts off your immune system. I was catching everything, from strep throat, which I hadn't had in like 35 years, to, or 30 years or whatever it was. So we had multiple things. And my son had just started kindergarten too. So now we were bringing in this whole new flock of germs from a new source.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in January 2019, I got to go meet Evan Carmichael. He came here. And that started a whole new wave of like inspiration and belief in myself and wanting to do all of these different things. It was also the month that was my sickest from in the whole time I've been sick, except for when I first came home. And it was in making all of these plans and talking to my doctor. And I kept telling her that, I felt like I had the flu and I couldn't get out of bed, and this was happening and that was happening. Again, I told her my anxiety was elevated every time I took this. And that is one of those things where, like I was saying before, is once you're labeled, oh, it can't possibly be this medication you're taking. It's got to be you, because you've struggled with this for so long. And it didn't matter that I wasn't taking anxiety medicine anymore. To her, it can't be something that I'm doing wrong or something, the medication. I ultimately told her too that I was done. I was like, I know that it's happening only when I take this. I know that this is making me worse and not better. Anyways, like I said, this was supposed to be my saving grace, and it went the opposite direction. And it was really, I'm gonna say that it was a blessing in disguise, because it was at that point, like I said, I hadn't really realized that quitting the psych meds was me taking my power back. To me, it was just the end of my rope with what had been going on. But then having this experience with this other medication, I kind of started to realize that conventional medications just didn't work for me. And then I needed to find a way to make my life better, myself. Um, Now I still take a couple of medications that help with the symptoms. I still take prednisone, and I still take over-the-counter pain medication, because without those at this point, I'm not sure how well I would be moving around. But compared to all of the other heavy duty stuff that I was taking, it's really nothing. Excuse me. But I started at that point to research supplements, and I had already quit dairy because my youngest had a milk allergy I found out when I was nursing. And I realized when I started consuming dairy again, how much it was making my body hurt, because I had it removed from my diet for so long. But I started looking into like sugar and all of these other different things that I could kind of get out of they were unnecessary to get out of my body, keep out of my body, or at least in limited quantities, amounts. I still like my Oreos and things once in a while,
Yeah,
but I
why
don't
not? Yeah, yeah,
eat, you know what I mean? Like on a
yeah,
my daily average of sugar is much, much lower than, I put cream in my flavored creamer in my coffee. That's about usually the most sugar that I have in a day. But I still notice if I eat other things. So next morning I wake up and my eyes will be all crusty and my fingers hurt more than normal. Um, but it was kind of in that I was like, like I said, I've got to figure out a way to manage this holistically, basically, because the meds weren't doing it for me. The meds weren't going to cure me. The meds weren't going to get rid of the disease, the illnesses. All they were doing, I'm not say all, but what they were doing is managing symptoms. Nothing was going to make me better without working on myself, basically. So I really do. And I know a lot of people struggle hearing that, because it sounds conceited, it sounds self-centered, it sounds godlike, it sounds like whatever you want. I've definitely gotten lots of kickback in different Facebook communities
mm-hmm.
because of, people ask for suggestions, and I'm like, well, I eliminated this, and this. Oh, well, it can't be that simple. It's like, try to stop eating sugar for a month and tell me how simple it is to do that right off the bat. It's not easy. I mean, it's the concept is simple, but it's not easy to kick sugar. It's not easy to kick these different things, but it's much healthier for you than popping a bunch of pills. And I know, again, and I'm not knocking anybody that does. I've definitely tried a lot of them. I'm still taking some myself. But the more of that you can keep out of your body in general, the better off you're gonna feel, and at least in my opinion. Again, I've also been really, really lucky, I guess you can say, or maybe it's the things that I'm doing that this hasn't progressed faster than it could have. But yeah, that was that leads us all the way up pretty much into 2020, which is what I call my year of surrender. And actually, I take that back. 2019 was also the year that I met David Meltzer. So that was another very pivotal moment for me.
Talking about that in the previous 109, right? Yeah.
Yeah, was meeting him, and then getting to mentor with him. And that was what I call probably the third part of my healing journey, was realizing how much more there was that I could be doing to help myself, with his help, of course. I was still healing from the Humira. It took like 8 or 9 months for that to get out of my system and get back to my baseline and start feeling better from the medication. But in that time, I met David. I actually met him. I learned of him from and this is funny because I think sometimes we have to hear somebody's name or see their face several times before we actually, it dawns on us who they are or how they're supposed to play a role in our life. Because I had heard about him before through a man named Brad Yates who does EFT tapping videos.
Oh, okay, I know the EFT. Yeah, emotional
Okay.
freedom technique, isn't it?
Yes. And I was introduced to that by my now best friend that I was telling you about earlier. All these things, as I said, all these things kind of, they all connect together. But I had heard the name, but the name didn't mean anything to me at that point. And it started to make sense to me when I read about him in Evan Carmichael's book, Your One Word. And I found him on social media, and I was actually running my Unbreakable campaign at the time, trying to get it off the ground. And initially contacted him because I wanted help trying to figure that out and to see if he would, want to participate in, making a video for that. And I ended up reaching out to him. I tried to get on his IG live and something went wrong and it wasn't working. So I reached out to him through DM and ultimately signed up for, he was at that time doing where he would mentor anyone for a month for free. And then you decided if you wanted to continue with him or not, paid mentoring. And so I signed up for that. And it took a few weeks to get set up, but I ended up having my first session with him. And I remember being so pumped up because I had all these business questions I wouldn't ask him, like, how am I going to do this? And how do I get, the campaign off the ground? And how do I do that? And he was like, you're not going to do any of this stuff. So you get your health situated. And I was like, all right. Now, just for reference, I'm on the East Coast. He's on the West Coast. There's like 3,000 miles between us. I'd never really talked to this man before, except for a little bit in DM. So for him to say that to me, and then the frame of mind I was in at that point was I wanted to grow. I wanted to learn. And I was like, he took his time to talk to me. I better listen. It was not the advice I was looking for, but it was definitely the advice I needed. And over the next several months, he helped me with practical and some metaphysical spiritual tips to help me get in better health. So one of the things that we focused on quite a bit was sleep. And mentoring with him basically consisted of a few minute phone call every couple of weeks. And then I was able to message him if I had any questions. And those first 3-4 months, I had to kind of put all of my business stuff, and the campaign ended up on hold because I realized I was actually getting sicker because I wasn't able to kind of listen to people's stories at that point without absorbing their trauma. And I wasn't in a position myself yet to help them. So I was having a lot of guilt from that. And ultimately said I, had to put that on hold. January 2020, I kind of declared to, not everyone, but declared to who mattered to me at that point that I was going to go back to basics and strip my life of anything that was unnecessary to really be able to focus on what was really important to me and to figure out what was really important to me too at the same time. I find that a lot of us get really bogged down with the things that we think that we need to be doing, the things we think we need to be doing by ourselves, not asking for help with, the obligations we have to lots of other people. And a lot of it really isn't actually necessary, as most of us found out during this, later, after I made this declaration, when everything started to shut down because of the pandemic. I didn't actually think about that till a couple of months ago, that was my declaration and kind of set off 2020. I was already doing that, which was kind of interesting to me. But it gave me the chance to, like I said, strip away anything unnecessary. And come March, I told David I was ready. I was like, I've been doing all of this inner work. I'm doing all these things. I'm ready to launch, get my business back off the ground, trying to make money, trying to make sense of all of this. And then everything's shut down like 2 weeks later. So that was when I learned, I had people coming to me asking me if I can make custom masks. And I was like, no, I don't know how to sew. And decided when a third person asked me that I was going to learn, or at least attempt to learn, because I believe in the law of three. I kind of felt like the universe was speaking to me at that point, and spent a couple weeks learning how to operate a sewing machine and learning how to sew, and ended up launching my Etsy shop, because nobody was buying custom t-shirts or apparel, which is what I had been making with Posh Notions for the past several years. That there was just no need for it, and if there was, they weren't coming to me at that point, you know. So yeah, that sums up everything up until basically hatching my idea for the upcycling company and 2 Minute Drill and all of the stuff I was doing with David and whatnot. So I don't know if you have any questions, but
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story. I mean, to think, you know, you went through it, depression, all those illnesses, and when you said that, actually, you know, connected with me because I went through depression myself, and so, you know, and the reason I asked you that question about the thoughts is because I went through that myself. Is all that about the people that are around you, you know, the thoughts that you have yourself, the ignoring of your own body, all that stuff, and a bit like you know, I just got fed up totally with how I felt, and so I decided to make a change. And I had the thought that I was going to come off the meds. For me, mine was called citalopram. My depression meds was that, but like you say, a lot of the time it's about, you know, recognizing where you are in your body and and the thoughts that are going on, because I wasn't aware of my thoughts. So, you know, I just thought I don't want to be here. Like I had a young family, all that sort of stuff, and it's the thoughts and the things you tell yourself, and that's the thing I wasn't really aware of. And then, a bit like you, I had a book land on my desk. Well, mum gave me a book. Feel the fear and do it anyway, and it's the start of my personal development journey. But and this is like, you know, I think for me the drugs helped me get into a place where I could do the work, and then I could slowly come off them. So I had this place where I had anxiety that led to depression, very similar, and then through that process I want to come off them. I need to do the work because I'm so fed up of how I was feeling. That's when that happened. But yeah, and you're talking about when you went through that whole process, and that you know, you met David, but you come off the meds, you started to look at your circle of people, which was really interesting, like Gary V and the inspirational people. You went off and did that, and then you obviously started, you know, doing your business. So just going back a little bit, because there's that little bit of a gap where I think with when you talk about David, and there's some work to be done before you got to the business. What shifted you from, because you said you're ready, what made you get ready for that shift before you went into the business? What actually was the trigger for you to go, I'm ready now, I need to get on with this? What
um
happened?
so I really like what you said about the meds and helping you while you did the work, because
Mm,
that's exactly how I feel about medication in general now. Is it's not meant to be a cure. It's not meant to be, and I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of this. It's not meant to, I feel like a lot of people think it's meant as the be all end all. It's meant to replace all of the work, right? It's a shortcut in essence for a lot of people, unfortunately. And it's because doctors are giving it to patients as a
mm,
shortcut. I was never told about all of this other stuff that I could be doing. And I get it. I'm an adult. I could have done research, but I wasn't even aware that this stuff even existed. And I really feel like doctors, I give them credit because I'm sure there are a lot of people that come in there that don't want to do the work, just want the meds. And if you're not giving the meds, you're not helping the person, like yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, people come back and they sue and there's all these problems. I really feel like you said, that the psych meds, the arthritis meds, all of these different medications are meant to, which is again why I took the Humira, was a way to slow things down or to calm them down just enough for you to put in the work and figure out what you actually need to do to heal yourself. But a lot of people aren't open to that. The majority of people, unfortunately, either don't know about it or aren't open to it. But what made me feel like I was ready, that's interesting. And I'm going to have to, it's an interesting question. I'm going to have to actually think about that because I'm not 100. It was just a feeling. It was just a knowing that I'm in a much better place than I ever have been. I had more energy. I felt ready. Things weren't perfect, but it was like it was just like a knowing. I don't know how else to describe it, but that I felt really good about making the decision to start working on my business again. It wasn't a need. It wasn't like I need to do this. It was, again, I had stepped back, I had surrendered, and I didn't even really 100% understand what surrender meant at that point. I had read the book. It's called The Surrender Experiment, was one that David suggested to me. And I could see how the way that this man did this and how these things came to him in the universe, or from the universe, by doing that. But I didn't really think that I was in a position to do it myself at that point, I guess. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but it's interesting because it's now coming back up again. And now I actually feel more ready, especially with everything that's happened the past year and a half. So yeah, it was just kind of, for me, it was just a knowing that this was, at the very least, I wanted to give it another shot, you know? It like I said, it was funny because I made the decision, I made the declaration that I was going to do this, and then my plans weren't what the universe had planned, right? So I had to yet surrender again and go, okay, I'm taking what's kind of coming to me at that point. It's not settling, it's literally listening to your intuition and kind of being guided versus trying to force through everything, because there was absolutely no way to force your way through COVID. Like, there was things that had to be done. I am high risk. I had to take certain precautions above and beyond. Unfortunately, you know, I know a lot of people are quarantined and were staying at home. But like, I wasn't going anywhere. Like, I didn't go to the store. I didn't go to see my doctor. I didn't leave my house for over a year to go anywhere, except to my daughter's graduation, which was very early on, and, you know, in a setup in a safe way. And that was not something I was willing to miss at that point in time, since they were having it. But for me, it really, the next, and looking back on it now, it's kind of funny, but the next several months was successful because I had chosen to be led, if you want to, you know, put it that way, listen and just kind of have fun with things and roll with the punches and do the best I can. And I didn't have a specific outcome in mind. And all of this is kind of now just coming to light in the last couple of weeks, how this all really transpired and why it transpired the way that it did. Because at the time, I wasn't consciously thinking like, I'm going to surrender, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I was just kind of allowing things to happen, you know. And that's for people who are familiar with like Abraham Hicks teachings, or, you know, have read Course in Miracles. Like, the art of allowing is really a huge, important part of letting things kind of come with ease and grace and feel good and all of those different things. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly tell everybody. So in August, I decided that I wanted to, because of all of my experiences trying to get supplies that were not really readily available during quarantine, and trying to make masks to sell and to help people and to donate, I decided in August that I wanted to build an upcycling company, and talked to David. And I was like, do you think this is something I could do? And he's like, absolutely. I was like, and he had started this private coaching group that I was a part of, that I'm still a part of. And I was like, okay. And then it kind of just sat there. I was like, well, not quite sure how to go about doing this, especially not in quarantine. So I just kept working on my sewing skills. And at the same time, David was running these competitions. I think he was doing it on YouTube at that point, called 2-Minute Drill, where you have 2 minutes to pitch your business idea. And I don't know what the cash and prizes or whatever was available at that point. I wasn't honestly paying that much attention to it, because I didn't feel like I had any business competing in something like that, because I didn't have, you know, NFL backers or $1 million contracts, or, you know, this. I didn't even know what a VC was at that point. You know, I didn't know how people raised money to do this stuff. It wasn't, again, it wasn't part of my world at that point in time. But later on in November, or I think it was like October, they were talking about bringing it to global TV. And I was kind of half listening, and I'm asking questions, and I'm like, not really ever thinking that this is something that I'm going to do, but it was interesting to me. The concept was interesting to me. And I was like, this is information at least I can use for the future. I'm going to eventually have to learn how to pitch my business. And so again, I was kind of collecting information at that point. But later on in November, he was telling everybody, like, this is the last chance for the tryouts. And, you know, we're going to be recording in December, and anybody who hasn't signed up yet needs to do so now. And that means you, Bonnie, and like calls me out in front of the entire group. And I'm telling you for a fact that had he not done that, I would have never applied. I did not think at any point in time, like I said, that I belonged there. It wasn't like, I didn't feel like I was any kind of competition for these people. But I went ahead and I applied a few days later. And this is where I was talking where like kind of instinct and intuition and letting kind of the universe talk to you. I was filling out the application, and in the application it asked you for a mini pitch. And I'm like, I have no idea. And all of a sudden it was just like delivered to me, and I start typing, and I'm like highlighting and copy pasting and saving it into my notes in my phone. I'm like, I need to save this for later because I don't know if I'm going to remember it. This is really good. And my what do you call it? Your forget ideal client. What the heck is that called? My target audience. At that point in time, I had been trying to figure out for like 6 months, and all of a sudden, again, that was delivered to me, and I typed out this beautiful, sentence of who I thought my ideal client was, and I copied and saved that too. And I set off the application, and I was like, I'm done. And a few days later, I get an email, and I'm running around the house screaming. And I was like, I got picked, and I'm going to be on TV. My husband's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like trying to explain to people through text what I'm talking about. Like, look, everybody, I'm going to be on TV. That's all you need to know. I will let you know the details when it happens. And I got started to writing my pitch. And I asked David. He has these different guides. He's a pitch. One of them is a pitch guide. It's basically like there's all these different points that you kind of hit. I studied that, and I answered it as best as I could. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. I have over 400 recordings of myself on my phone practicing to nail that 2-minute pitch, because you only have 2 minutes. Like the clock runs down and that's it. And they can't hear you anymore. And my thoughts at that time really were just to do the best that I absolutely could, because again, I didn't think I was in a competition for these people, but I was like, I'm not going to embarrass myself, and I am not going to embarrass David. That was like my driving.
So good.
It was just my driving force at that point was like, I don't want to embarrass anyone on global television.
I love it.
So it's funny, and I'm gonna connect the dots here in a minute. But I ended up, just like I said, practicing my heart out, and the day came and our power went out. We had no power.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning or something. Our power went out, and our power came back on about a half an hour before I was supposed to log in to record, because everything was done virtually, and we still had no internet. So I'm running around kind of like trying to get ready. I'm like, it's either going to happen or it's not. I'm going to keep getting ready and pretend like this is still happening. And I'm repeating all of my affirmations and my mantras in my head. Like, everything's going to work out. We've got your back. Just breathe. I still have them hanging on my mirror here. And I kept practicing and practicing. And it was like 5 minutes before I was supposed to log in, and my son miraculously got our internet to kick back on, or however that works. And I went ahead and logged in. Now, recording something like this virtually and probably in person is a lot of standing around, waiting for your turn, waiting, again, you only speak for 2 minutes. There were several other contestants. The episode ended up, I think, having 4 or 5.
Was it, so in the episode, was there only 4, but was there more than that? Was it recording? Was it live?
It was recording live.
That says live.
We recorded in December, and then they released the episode.
Okay, so was it more than 4 people pitching though? Was there a lot more people pitching?
There was, I think, 6 sets. So like it was 4 before me, because I was supposed to be last and ended up being 5th or something, or I can't remember. But I think there's 4 before me, and then there was a couple after me.
Okay.
In the initial recording, and I get on, I'm like listening to everybody else, first of all, and I'm like shaking my head, like, that was fabulous. Like, I never ever intended to win. Like that wasn't my intention. Like I said, it was just to get through it and do the best that
I
I could.
I was going to ask, do you remember your pitch?
I have it hanging here. I don't remember it all word for word. But if anybody's interested in watching, it is still on Amazon Prime.
Okay, so where did they find that? Let's point people towards that. So Amazon Prime, what's it called?
2-minute drill.
2-minute drill. All right. Okay.
And I was season 1, episode 3. They actually just started season 2 last week.
Season 1, episode 3. Did you say? Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. Go on, carry on. You're saying, and so.
So that's okay.
Yeah. Because I'm just interested in the pitch. It was interesting. If you remember, you did 400 times. It's like a lot of time.
I probably could do it if I really wanted to. But for some reason, it still makes me nervous.
I can see it. I still see you like rubbing your palms. Like,
yeah. It's definitely, actually, I had a piece of elastic because I had like a fidget and I lost it. So I don't know what I did with it. Hey, dropped it when I was, here it is. Anyways, yeah, I usually sit here and fidget with this when I'm talking, so I'm not with my hands. But anyways, I was listening and I'm like, oh, that guy won. Oh, that guy, they definitely won. They had to win. And I gave my pitch and was like, okay, I'm done. Again, I'm like, I'm done. I was like, I got through that part of it. And the producer comes on and goes, oh, yeah, he comes, was it before? It might have been after. I think the last couple went. And the producer comes on after and goes, we need you to re-record. I was like, you got to be effing kidding me. Like, my adrenaline is finally starting to come down because like it's literally just this adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And I was a ball of nerves, and it was funny because I was fine. I wasn't really nervous until it was my turn to speak. And then all of a sudden this huge rush of adrenaline came over me. And I ended up stumbling over my words in the beginning. But he's like, we need you to re-record. So I re-recorded like 3 more times. And I was like, look, if my video was pixelated, which is why they wanted me to re-record. I guess they were going to like match the video with the voice or whatever. I don't know how they do the editing, fancy editing stuff. But because I think because I wasn't stumbling when I was re-recording and I had stumbled in the original, that was probably one reason. And I think part of the other reason they ended up using the original audio or video was because it was so authentic and kind of played into my story. Because the whole time you're watching, my videos literally cutting in and out. You can hear me clearly, but my video is cutting in and out because we had just had this ice storm that knocked our power and everything out. So the last couple, like I said, I ended up re-recording, and it dawns on me as I'm standing there, I was like, they didn't give me any negative feedback. And I'm like, wait a minute, no way. There's no way. And all of a sudden I turned to my phone because I was recording my own copy of this to have for myself. And I was like, I effing won. I did it. And then I'm standing there and the producer says, okay, everybody, the person who won, their face, I forget how he phrased, but basically only one person's face is going to show up on the screen. It's going to be the winner. Everybody else hang tight because we have questions to ask you. And all of a sudden my face pops up and I'm like,
oh, wow.
And I'm trying not to scream and freak out because I don't know all what they're recording. And I'm just going like this, I'm like, thank you, like the whole time. And I start tearing up. David starts tearing up. And they actually ended up titling that. I don't think it says the title on Amazon, but it does. I think it was on YouTube. They posted it on YouTube after it was, everything had aired, and it was titled "The Pitch That Made Us Cry."
Wow.
So, yeah, I ended up tearing David up, and it was just, the whole thing was so phenomenal. But to lead into like what I was saying, what we were talking about earlier, I actually fell into this weird reverse imposter syndrome thing. Whereas when it was over, I kind of did like this backslide because I couldn't figure out how the hell I went from where I felt like I was in this crawling phase of building a business to flying, because the prizes that they give you, and I've got people, the newspaper interviewing me, and the local cable news channel wanted to interview me, and going on podcasts, and all these things are happening, and people are asking me what's next, and it literally wasn't until last week that all of this started to kind of make sense for me. I ended up going back to David and saying, how did I win this? Like, what was it about me and my pitch that one, because like I said, never at any point in time was actually competing. Like I was just giving my pitch to not let, disappoint David and
I
disappoint
love that.
myself,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I did what I said I was going to do. That was
Mm.
all I was trying
Yeah.
to do, was
You made your
fulfill.
promise. You did it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it was, so I was telling you, I went back to David and I'm asking him, and he's telling me, well, you did this, you followed everything, you nailed all 5 of these, you had the emotional attachment was off the charts, and you practiced. We could tell that you practiced. A lot of people were reading and, or cutting their minute 30 seconds short, or all these different things. And I was finally kind of okay with the answers that he gave me, but it's still, for some reason, something wasn't sitting right. And I was telling you that we had a fire here a couple of 2 weekends ago. And prior to the fire, we had a branch land on a line out front, which and was intermittently exploding for several hours. It was terrifying. Later on, we had my son's e-bike battery, LiPo battery, exploded and caught fire, and exploded another battery. Multiple fire departments here. And luckily, and it was a complete miracle, nobody was hurt. After everything else had gone on, I sent my young guys down to the basement to take cover, because my truck was parked 3 feet away from where the fire was. And first thing I thought was the truck's going to blow. So the whole thing was a complete miracle. And what it also did for me, so I was definitely terrified. I was definitely in a state of anxiety and extreme fear. For the next, it took me a good week to kind of get over that. Like, it was like every time I would tell the story, it would get a little less intense. Like the first time I had to call the insurance company, I was shaking, I was trembling, and I was having a hard time getting the words out. I had a very urgent, tone. I was like, we need to get somebody out here to clean this up. It's multiple phone calls, like I said, to the EPA and all these different places. And I came in the house at one point, I think it was on Tuesday after the fire happened, and looked up and saw Gabby Bernstein's book, The Universe Has Your Back, Transforming Fear to Faith, like staring me in the face, like, hello.
It's there for you. It's the universe again, right? It's right.
So I picked it up and I'm like, this is a sign. And it gave me a lot of comfort, and it also led me to read Wayne Dyer's book, The Power of Intention, which I had also already owned and not read yet.
Is that a book that Oprah recommends? I think she talked about power intention. I think she was saying about that changed her life, like the intention. Go on, carry on. So no, I
believe it, because Gabby actually ended up, I was just reading in her other book, a 3rd book. So in 2 weeks, I've read almost less than 2 weeks, full 3 books, because it just I kept being led to read and read and read. And it was interesting. And I haven't even had a chance to share this with David, and I'm going to on Monday.
I'm getting a scoop.
But I finally realized that the whole reason, now maybe I had the best pitch, maybe I nailed everything, maybe I practiced, all of that's great.
Well, you did. I mean,
all of that was ego related. I was looking for a reason that, and why, when David even said that to me, it probably calmed my ego. It made sense to my ego. There's like, okay, but something still didn't completely feel right yet. Okay. And I was reading Wayne Dyer's book, and in there it's talking about, and Gabby talks about this too. I'm reading, now what's her other book? Oh shoot, I forgot the title of it, and it's a great book. It'll come back to me. The whole reason I managed to pull that off is because I surrendered, because my ego wasn't in the way. I did not go into that thinking I was the best. Now, maybe not wanting to disappoint somebody isn't the best reason, but my intentions were pure, and I wasn't focused on the outcome, which is the main part of manifesting an intention and making things allowing things to come to fruition. Is I wasn't trying to make anything happen. All I was trying to do was get in there, do my best, and get out.
It's like the promise, wasn't it? You made that promise, and you just said, I'm going to do this, and that's it. And that was, you didn't think about anything else. It was just, I'm promising to do this, and I'm following through on a thing that I intentionally wanted to promise somebody.
Exactly. And I was not hung up in I've got to win, or I'm only going to be happy if I win, or I'm a loser if I don't win, or none of those
Mm.
thoughts even crossed my mind. I didn't even know what the prizes were.
Because that's a
And
bit,
so
that bit's a bit,
after
that's where the ego bit kicks in a little bit when you're saying, I want this. So that's the ego thing, right? Is that what you're saying?
it absolutely is, the
Yeah.
ego has to win. The ego's only happy if and when the
Yeah.
ego, there's all of, and again, I'm not like a master at this by any means, but I'm connecting the dots backwards.
Mm.
I tortured myself for like 4 months going, I'm never going to be able to do this again. I don't know how I did it. I don't know if I'm good enough to do it again. I don't know if I want to do it. Like all of these they're all ego centered thoughts. And I wasn't allowing, the other part of it was being inspired. I was inspired to do my best. And those are the two main like components to making something, or allowing something. I keep saying making because it's a habit, right? Allowing something to manifest is getting out of your own way,
Yeah.
not letting the ego take over, allowing and being happy whether or not, like regardless of the outcome, basically. Like happiness cannot be your happiness cannot be determined on this and this and this and this that's outside of you, because otherwise you're never truly going to be happy. The happiness isn't going to last. Anytime those things are taken away from you, you're left right back at zero, if not worse off. But it was interesting to me. It took me 5 months and a fire to figure this out. And I really love the fact that David did exactly what I asked and answered what I did, right? The ego me, because he's the one that's taught me a lot of this different stuff. And I've heard all of these different things from him. It was reading it in the book after the fact, not actually looking for it, not digging for it when it was again, like delivered to my lap. And I made the connection of, oh my God, that's how it happened. Because I wasn't focused on making it happen. I was only focused on being a conduit, basically, and doing the best that I could. And like I could have walked out of there. Like literally I was telling people, like, I'm going to be on TV. I have no idea what are the prizes. I don't know. Are there prizes? Like it wasn't until they said on there, it's 50, you won 50,000 cash and prizes. I'm going,
That's a big old prize.
like, holy crap.
Thanks very much.
like,
Yeah.
like that's like, because that wasn't my intention. That never was my intention. And I know it sounds woo woo or kooky to some people to say that, but it really, that's not, like, it wasn't, I don't even think it was listed anywhere what the prizes were. My dedication though, it was almost like saying thank you to David by doing this, because he believes in me. I was riding his belief. He believed that this is something that I should be trying and that I was capable of doing. And it was me kind of saying, thank you for believing in me. Thank you for all of the different things in me. I'm going to fulfill my promise. I'm going to do it. You know what I said I'm going to do. I've been asking you all these questions about the pitch anyways. Like, so I am so grateful for it wasn't even a nudge. It was a blatant, like, sign up. Like
Yeah.
it was way more than a nudge. But I feel like the fact, he's a mentor and a friend of mine, but I feel like the universe is somewhat speaking through him to me, because it knows I've definitely historically been a hardhead. I've been stubborn. I very much I need to make this happen because nobody else is going to do it. I don't need to ask for help. Like all of these different ego driven, very, very ego driven. Like I will stand here and tell you that I was probably one of the most ego driven people on the planet, not realizing it, because we're taught to believe that we give of ourselves and do things for other people, and like that's selfless, right? And really forcing all of these things to happen and always doing things for everyone, never listening to myself, is actually one of the most selfish things that I possibly could have been doing, because I wasn't really fulfilling my true potential, all the way up until several years ago. So yeah, I've learned so much just in the past couple of weeks. And I really believe it was also because, again, with David's help, but I was able to shift from everything that I've learned in the past couple of years, shift oh my God, why did this happen to us? This is horrible. My son lost everything that meant anything to him. melted the garage, the truck almost blew, like all the negative to that was a complete miracle. And like, where do we go from here kind of thing? Like I'm kind of going through emotions to help my son recover all of his lost, because he lost his phone, he lost his bike, he's put everything he's had into this bike of his that ended ultimately perished in the fire. But I had a lot of fear. I'm not going to say that I didn't. Fear is also an ego driven, which people don't believe, or people don't, it's not something we learn, right? That fear is ego based, unless you kind of dive into these different texts. But I was very, very, very much wrapped up in fear and very jumpy the next several days. It wasn't actually until they came and cleaned up the mess this past Wednesday where I was fully able to completely relax, because I knew that this potential of it, continuing to combust was gone. It was removed from the property. But I was able to not get so sucked into the fear and anxiety like I definitely would have been even on medication a few years ago, because I was focusing on gratitude. I was focusing on the miracle. I was led to read these texts that help walk me through this stuff step by step. And then on top of that, being open to not only picking up the book, but actually reading and putting into practice what these spiritual teachers, we're teach people. So a lot of different components. It's just been, it's been amazing. I'm so excited that I got to talk to you today, because I've been bursting, like wanting to share this with somebody that would understand.
Yes, and I've got it.
Again, it's ego, but like, it was like,
I've got it.
I feel like it's my duty, like this stuff is meant to be shared, right? Like we've got to speak it kind of into existence and share it with people, so more people can be open to helping and changing themselves, because the more of us that lean into positivity and gratitude and miracles, the better off the world's going to be, point blank. So yeah, I was super excited when I was started piecing all of that together last night, and I was like, I've got it. I finally understand how this happened. What's super exciting about that too, on top of that, is all of these other things that I've been trying to force my way through, especially this question of what's next. And I felt so pressured to answer something that sounded really good. And I would run through what my plans are for the upcycling business. And yes, I still have all these plans to do these things. I just have no idea how the hell I'm going to do it. The how part I haven't figured out yet. And I was trying to kind of force my way through that. And this is another eureka that, like, I don't need to force my way through that. I need to know what the plan is, to have pure intentions, allow that to happen, and then kind of let the how work its way out and listen to the messages that are being brought to me, the people that are being delivered to me. Another perfect example of this is, I told you I put the Unbreakable campaign on hold almost 2 years ago. And I did an interview a few weeks ago with, you might know Terry Thompson, who's
so he's on Instagram, like Evan Carmichael against that community, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I did an interview with him a few weeks back, and he messages me a couple of days later, somewhat urgently, and it's like, I gotta talk to you. And we get on Zoom, and he's super excited. And here we're bringing the Unbreakable campaign back, rebranded. It's now called Unbreakable Stories, and largely in part to my ability to let go of controlling everything, because I'm definitely still struggle with having to control the way things are supposed to go, in my mind, are supposed to go. But on top of that, because he willingly was like, I'll handle all the tech, I'll handle all this, all of the stuff that I hated doing, all of the stuff that was dragging me down, that got me stuck in the first place. The emotional stuff I'm still working on, but I'm much more prepared to handle and set solid, good boundaries for myself in working with the different people, and it's structured differently. But it was like, I immediately said yes. I was like, it was a no-brainer for me. It was, I finally was able to say to myself, it doesn't matter to me how this turns out. It could go phenomenal or it could flop. I am no worse off. Nobody is any worse off than they were before he came to me and said that he'd like to work on this with me. And that was a huge huge deal for someone recovering from like clinical OCD, which I was, again, diagnosed with at probably like age 19 or something.
Wow.
So over 2 decades of well, a lot of that was cured when I first got sick, because there was a lot of stuff I realized that I couldn't control anymore because I physically wasn't able to do it myself. But the thought part of that didn't necessarily go away until I kind of started diving into the rest of this stuff. But OCD was a very much, it's not what people think it is either. People joke about, I have to have a super clean house. I'm OCD about that. I'm like, OCD is not just keeping a clean house. We're just going to leave it at that. Not even going to go down that trail with that right now. But it's just been, I've had this roller coaster, right? So I had this high and then this low and this high and this low, and then I had another high of the show, and then I was getting so down on myself because I felt like I just did this amazing thing. I should feel amazing. Why do I not feel amazing? And I could not figure it out. And I eventually pulled myself out of it. And when I stopped focusing on it, the answers started to come amazingly, right?
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
It really was me finally, and it wasn't like a conscious, I surrender this, but it was a subconscious, okay, I'm not going to keep going down this path and trying to figure this out. I'm just going to believe what David told me. That makes perfect logical sense, and let it go. And then all of these different things kind of started to happen, and these amazing things have started to happen, all because of that one word, which is surrender, so yeah, it's been a crazy, amazing, growth filled journey for sure.
I mean, it's amazing what you've been through. I mean, the whole thing about your illness, and you had your illness, you had to challenge that, and having the courage to go on the pitch, to reach out to David Meltzer, to go and see Gary Vee, to link up with Kevin Carmichael, and there's all been a whole journey of you gradually stepping into this version of you, which is this, you're becoming, it sounds like you're becoming the real version of you. I don't know whether that's what it's coming across. This is the real you. You're still evolving, and that's what it sounds like. I don't know what you make of that. What are your thoughts around that?
I 100% agree. I am allowing myself to grow in ways that I never would have dreamed of. And I also don't think I would be as appreciative had I not had all of that stuff. I now see that life doesn't have to be full of struggle. It doesn't have to be full of all of these different things to get to where we want to go. But I don't think, like I said, that without all of those different things happening, that I would have learned the same lessons, even if it was a decade after the fact, that I finally came back and said, okay, now I understand why that had to happen. Or now I understand, what I did to attract that into my life. Because it's very easy for us to go, oh, that's not going to happen to me. We're looking at somebody else's life that is full of struggle and heartache and, trauma and turmoil, and not necessarily learn from what's happened to them, because we don't think it's going to happen to us. Again, the ego getting in the way. But when those things happen to us, it's much easier, if we allow it to be anyways. It's much, I feel like, because we've lived through it, if and when we're open to learning the lessons that those things were supposed to teach us, the lessons are going to stick a little better. I know there's a lot of lessons I've had to learn over and over and over again. And it's funny because these things come up and they get stronger each time, because my ego is so hard-headed and stubborn about things. Like I said, with the fire, I haven't been involved in a fire like that ever in my life. Our neighbors had one when I was a little kid. Nothing that up close and personal ever. And I've lived in this house for 14 years, something like that. And but I never would have been led to reaching for those books and figuring out these different things, and getting back to, like, somewhere in the last 6 months or so, 8 months, whatever it was, I lost that connection that I found at the beginning of 2020. And this was kind of leading me back to that connection with inner spirit, with God, with whoever, the universe, whatever you want, makes sense to each person, that what they want to call it. And I would have just continued struggling. That's all. That's the only way I can really feel this working out. Had I not had these revelations and things kind of brought to my attention, is I would have just continued living a life of struggle, continue getting sick, continue feeling sorry for myself, continue focusing on all the stuff that I can't do. Like, all of those things really aren't helpful, whether you're spiritual or not. Dwelling in that constant negativity, which makes us sick in the first place, or has the potential to make us sick in the first place.
Yeah, and what you've been through has been amazing. So I suppose now you've been through all that stuff, and you've got the fire. So you've got your business. You're doing your Unbreakable. So how is that all coming together? I mean, so where are you now? I mean, where are you right now? Is it things take? I mean, imagine things are starting to take off. What's going on at the moment?
So it's funny. I like how you didn't ask me what's next.
I wanted to stay away from that because I'm like, I could kill.
No, it's just funny. It's just funny because that, like I said, I was allowing that question to really stress me out, because I felt like I had to figure everything out every time I went on a podcast. They were like, "What's next?" I'm like, da 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 da, and I finally realized. I said to this woman yesterday I was interviewing with, I was like, you know what? I don't know what's next. I never planned to freaking win that thing anyways. So I didn't have a plan with what was going to happen afterwards. It's like, I was just going to keep living my life because I never intended to win in the first place. And getting that out and kind of laughing about it allowed me to just be okay with just being. And that's literally what I'm doing right now. It is summertime here in the States. My little ones are home. I'm still a full-time mom. Terry is handling the details of what's Unbreakable Stories. He's putting the website together and doing, actually the website, it's my tongue untied, is live now, I believe.
Well, make sure you give me that so I can link it in the video.
For sure. I believe it's just unbreakablestories.com. I can double check. I am allowing. I'm very much aware right now, because of everything's happened and all the reading that I've been doing. I want to stay as connected as possible to spirit, continue to get out of my way, continue to let my ego get smaller and smaller and smaller, and less prominent in my day-to-day life. Because I am not willing to, and this is probably ego too, but I am not willing to spiritually, right at this point, give that up so easily again. Like, the road getting back to myself and inner spirit just in the past 8 months has not been super easy. And I don't feel like there's any reason that I should allow myself to backslide that much. Now, it could happen. I have no idea. I'm not going to stress out about it. So I'm really just focused right now on doing the best I can, keeping an eye on the desires and dreams that I have for what I'd like to do, but with no specific attachment to it. It has to happen like this and like this and like this and like this.
So you are speaking my language, because with InspirationNation, the podcast, everything like that, there was certain things I wanted specifically to happen, but it's not happened like that at all. And I've learned that I want this sort of it's quite a broad thing now. I'm just leaving it to evolve. So you saying that has given me nice confidence in leaving it in that way. And it's really weird. Some weird things happen today. In fact, you said, "Are we going to do this podcast today?" You said, "I'm going to make it happen." You made it happen, or whatever happened. There's been things happening on the YouTube channel, which is I can't explain, that are starting to go up. And it's really strange that I'm starting to. So I don't know when we have this conversation, but there's weird things that are happening, like this sort of weird energy going on. I don't quite understand it. So maybe I think you've explained something to me today. I think we're meant to talk today. And I don't know why. But there's things happening. There's things happening that I can't understand, and I don't know. I've not got to that. I don't think I've got to your stage yet. But there's this. But when I force things, it just was really backfire, and I've had to learn that lesson. Like, it's turned up in different ways. Like, it shows up differently. It's the same lesson, but it shows up in slightly different ways. So it's testing me in some way. But yeah, now I just want this thing to do really well. I'm just leaving it to evolve, and I think that's a massive thing. So thank you for that. I've learned a
You're
lot from that. So there's a question I want to ask you, and I think, you know, as we get to the end, I want to say, what is the question I should have asked you?
interesting. It's funny. I asked David that question one time. What's a question that nobody's asked you that you wish somebody asked you? And he told me, and then I asked him it live. And he's like, I knew you were going to do that to me. Um, I'm not sure. The one question I get asked a lot is in these interviews is, you know, if you could leave our viewers with one piece of advice, you know, what would it be, kind of thing. And it's funny because my answer definitely changed just from last night, because my answer is
Wow.
usually, you know, don't give up, keep going. And I still believe that to be true. Like, don't give up on yourself, don't lose hope. All of that is still very true. But now I would say, don't push things too hard. Like, don't try to force, like you said, everything to happen a specific way, because you're going to be that's resistance. That's resistance to what's meant to happen. And you're resisting and putting resistance where there doesn't need to be any. But as for what you didn't ask, I mean, I don't know. I love the conversational style, which is why I have a hard time with when I keep talking and talking and talking, because I feel like I'm you know, people tell you like not to dominate a conversation. We're taught that kind of growing up, is to listen. So I have a hard time with that. But I don't. I'm not sure. I don't feel like there was anything that should have happened that didn't, because that's just kind of where I'm at with things in life right now. As if it's meant to happen, that it's going to happen, and
I love.
sometimes whether we like it or not.
Yeah,
So
and I think, yeah, so, you know, whether it happens or not, we've all got to deal with whatever the things that come to us right now. I think you sort of referenced that, you know, it's coming to us, you know, and we've then got to handle it in a way where we think it's best, and that intuition piece. And I'm very much of the opinion of Mr. Evan Carmichael about idea action, those things coming to us. And yeah, I've learned a lot from that, actually, to be fair. And I think there's a lot of that in what you were saying about listening to that intuitive piece. And I think, you know, the things you've been through, especially with mental health and things like that, I think it sometimes shuts you off from all that. And I think, you know, and I think and I'm going to say this for myself, that that woke me up. I was so asleep. And it sounds to me that you know, you've gone through these amazing things, and it's sort of like now you are the person that you're evolving to the person that you feel that you're you. That's what's coming across, and that's what I've been hearing throughout today. And I just want to say thank you so much for being so open and being so honest about everything that you've gone through. So if there's one piece of inspirational advice that you would leave our listeners, and I did ask you this before on 109, but it may have changed now, because last night you said you had some changes. So if you go, because I mean, I'm always looking for inspiration, because that's my one word, is inspiration. So, you know, if people are looking for inspiration, you were mentioning the word inspiration quite a few times actually today, which is great. If you're going to inspire people or leave someone with inspiration or something inspirational, what would you say to them or us?
honestly, I think the best thing that kind of sums all of this up, is that you can't let life get in the way of living. Things are going to happen. Things are going to throw you off what you feel like your course is meant to be. And I really feel like, when those things kind of pop up, and I'm learning now, and I'm paying attention, I'm listening, that those are actually pushing you towards where you are supposed to be going. It's just like when you know, me getting sick and getting fed up with doctors, all of these different things that could have been viewed very negatively and are typically viewed as negatives, were all, like you said, leading me to actually becoming who it is that I'm meant to become, versus who I have no idea what would have ended up happening to me had I kept going the way I was going, to be honest with you. So yeah, just keep on going. And just don't be so damn like connected or stuck on things working out a specific way, because you're just going to make things way harder on yourself.
Brilliant. The imperfect plan, right? There's nothing perfection. It's always evolving. So we think it's the plan. It's not the plan. We create a plan, but it's never going to be the plan, right? Imperfect action. There's a brilliant saying, and my daughters are all actually saying, it's better to show up imperfectly than just not to show up at all. And I think that's a fantastic thing that I saw in her wall. And again, and I think this is what speaks to me in terms of what you're saying. Lovely. Okay, so we're going to wrap this right up. But before we go, I want to say, where can we find you? I know it's Posh Notions everywhere, but do you want to just any specific places you want our listeners to go?
So I only talked a little bit about this. I am I guess this could have answered your question this way before, but I am now kind of going back to my roots of my business and looking for new businesses and organizations to work with, making their branded apparel. So I make all of that by hand. While I'm, focusing on or opening myself up to what the plan the universe has to offer me at the same time. So if anybody's interested or has a need for something like that, please reach out to me. Like you said, I am Posh Notions everywhere. My website is poshnotions.com. People can message me, DM me on, Instagram, Facebook, on Twitter, pretty much everywhere. And the last place is I still have some handmade items up on my Etsy shop, which you can also find by searching for Posh Notions. If you look for Posh Notions, there's like 4 pages of me on Google. I've pretty much dominated that name. So you can find me that way too.
Fantastic. So thank you very much, Bonnie, aka Posh Notions. I just love that. So I'm just going to wrap this up. So guys, thank you very much, Bonnie, for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on and say it's amazing. So don't forget, you can catch us on at Listen to IN on Twitter. Jose Noya-Inspiration. Just put it in your Google machine and you'll, similar to Bonnie, you'll find us all over the place. So don't forget to, when you listen to the podcast, press a 5-star review. That'd be fantastic. Really appreciate it. But Bonnie, appreciate it. We will catch up again, I'm sure, at some other point. See how you're getting on with this journey of yours. I'd love it. So it's Inspiration Nation. We'll catch you guys later. Wow, what an amazing conversation there with Bonnie. Such an inspiring story. So there's 3 takeaways from me. 1, don't be specific about the outcome. Be fluid, have the vision, but let it be specific. Number 2, do the work. Get in a position where you can have a space to do the work necessary to get to your goals. And number 3, ensure your intention is clear. Your intention before you do anything, your intention for your goals, intention for what you want to do, because that will come out in what you do. So I want to know now, what's your biggest takeaway? Don't forget to hashtag it with InspirationNation in the comments below and make sure you commit to action. If you want to see another amazing video, check this other video right over here with Brian J. Esposito. I'm sure you'll love it. And don't forget to hit that amazing bell, because that will tell you when another video goes live. And don't forget to subscribe, because that will mean a lot to me and that'll give you more inspirational videos. So until next time, it's Inspiration Nation and I'll see you there.